Hi everyone, it's Bev here, your mental health coach, providing tips, tools, techniques and advice helping you to stay mentally strong in these difficult times and beyond. The topic for this video is therapy. What I want to do is bust some myths around therapy and to give you some benefits of going to see a therapist. Now, the world has had a meltdown, and the biggest thing at stake for every one of us has been our mental health. Being in lockdown, self-isolating, working from home has all created change in our lives. Change means stress, and stress can lead to anxiety and other mental issues. So you would think that the first thing that people would do when we come out of lockdown and out of this situation is to find themselves a therapist and do a mental health check, have an MOT. What has been the impact of all of this change on my mental health? No, people prefer to go out to get their hair cut, to look better, without considering that by going to see a therapist, they might actually feel better. So why is that? Why are people so reluctant to go and see a therapist? I can think of two main reasons. The first is stigma, and the second is it doesn't work. Okay, so let's look at the stigma. How do you break down the stigma? By breaking down the stigma, by going to see the stigma, getting into the eye of the stigma. My research shows that the stigma of mental health and issues started around the Middle Ages. And really, if you had any kind of mental condition in the Middle Ages, it was thought that you were possessed by demons. And what they would do would be to exorcise the demons out of you. That's one way. Or another way would be to torture you to get the demons out of you. And the church actually said at this time that any kind of mental issue was a deadly sin. And depression, for example, was linked to sloth. And sloth is laziness. And so they took it upon themselves, the church took it upon themselves to exorcise or to get that laziness or melancholia out of you. So the stigma started at that time because you would not volunteer yourself for torture. Then later on in history, people dealt with their mental illnesses in society by erecting huge mad houses. And the most famous of them all was Bedlam. Now, if you went into Bedlam, you would seldom come out. You would not be able to walk out the door. Now, why and how did you get into Bedlam? Well, if you showed depression, anxiety, personality disorders, schizophrenia, but on top of that, if you were a naughty child, your parents could say, I'll send you to Bedlam, right? It became part of the vernacular to say, it's Bedlam in here. People became afraid of their own minds. If you became pregnant, you could go to Bedlam. If you were poor, you could go to Bedlam. And so you can see where the stigma came, because people became so afraid. Now today, we still have that legacy, because people still think that going to see a therapist is a sign of weakness. I should be able to sort out my own issues. That's one part of it. And the other side of it was that if I go to see the therapist, it's an admission of me being crazy. That cannot be further from the truth. Going to see a therapist is saying, I can't do this alone, I need some help. Just imagine if that you had a leak in the pipes in your house, in the water pipes. Would you stay there and sort of say, well, it's me buying a bad property and I have to suffer that? No, you'd get a plumber in and you'd get an expert in to sort it out. Absolutely, that's not a sign of weakness or making a mistake, not at all. So the other thing that people say to themselves is that there's no point going to see somebody because it's not going to work. Well, at the same time as almshouses and madhouses and bedlam and really being pretty cruel to people with mental health, there was a psychologist, I should say, called Sigmund Freud, and his cronies Adler and Jung and all these great thinkers of the time at the turn of the 19th century were absolutely fascinated with the mind. And Sigmund Freud gave birth to the whole body of psychology called psychoanalysis. And he was the one, I should say, in modern times that came up with the talking therapy. So talking it out in his head, and many therapists believe that talking it out releases the pressure. Talking it out to a professional is even better. Now, I should say, why a professional, not your friend? Well, because your friend is your friend. Your friend is not your therapist to sort your problems out. Neither does your friend want to listen to your issues over and over again. The chances are you talk to one friend, they have one point of view. You talk to another friend, they have another point of view. You talk to your Auntie Mildred, she has another point of view. And what happens is you become confused and it makes you stagnant. Now, if you speak to an expert, they will be able to unravel the issue. They stick with the issue. Yes, it is true that you might open up a can of worms and one issue might lead to another issue, but you're dealing with it. And actually you will, as a consequence of therapy, become lighter, clearer, able to concentrate, be happy. How about that? So it does work because millions of people go to therapists such as myself, and they get to be healed or they find results. Now, the thing for you is that if you are considering going to therapy, you need to decide what kind of therapy, what type of therapy you want. Do you want individual one-to-one therapy? Do you want it face-to-face? Well, that's tough in these times, but there are Zoom contacts. There are so many ways of connecting with a therapist. Is it couple counseling that you need? Is there another person involved? Do you want group therapy? Certainly when people have issues with smoking, addictions, they will benefit from other people's story. Or are you experiencing some issues in your family and you could benefit from family therapy? Then, after you decided the type of therapy you want and the mode, face-to-face or online or even on the telephone, that's fine. Then you need to consider the approach. Now, where do I begin? There are so many approaches. It's just, how do you want to resolve this issue and how fast? How far back do you want to go? Because certainly this virus and the way that the world is will trigger vulnerabilities in people's sense and sensibility now. So how do you want to approach your therapy sessions? How often, in fact? So I don't even know where to begin. I can speak about myself, that my training took me through psychoanalysis, behavioral psychology, which includes CBT. I did everything that I could think of. I I use pretty much everything because I am a bit of a geek when it comes to psychology. And so I will study anything to see if it has anything that I can use for my clients. That's me, but some people will specialize in a certain area, in fact. So some people will specialize in grief counseling, some people will specialize in addiction, some people will specialize in weight. Pays your money, take your choice. Now, the difference between a therapist and a friend is that the therapist is a professional and they've had training. So how I look at an issue that when somebody comes to see me, it's a knotty, tied together issue. For instance, they might be coming with presenting symptoms like I have low self-esteem. And it's all entwined and it affects the client's life. And what the therapist will do is stick with it. They will unravel bits that were not connected, but actually loosens up the state of mind until the person can start to breathe and function again. And this is the point of a therapist. They will unravel the problem. They do that by listening. Now, you might think that it's just about the words that you speak, but no, it's the tone that you use. It's the choice of language. It's the connection of the words to your neurological state of mind. The therapist will take whatever issue you bring to the table seriously. It is important. If it's important for you, it's important for the therapist. You're going to get attention. You're going to get genuine regard, respect, and the therapist will never, a good therapist will never judge you, never judge you. So I hope I've spoken to you about some of the benefits of going to a therapist, to have a chance of happiness, to live your life as you intended, to be able to smell the roses, to engage in your life. I hope I've dispelled some of the myths. The stigma, well, if you go, there is no stigma. There is only happiness at the other side. And it does work. But you have to do your research. It's really, really important. Research, research, and research. I'll leave it there. Have an excellent day.